Dean and Tyler Listle are registered investment advisor representatives. Investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, and Secure Retirement Solutions, LLC are not affiliated companies.
It's time for Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. Now, here are your hosts, Dean and Tyler.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Tyler and I will discuss topics that affect your retirement, such as investments, income planning, Social Security, and more. How are you this morning, Tyler?
I'm doing well, Dean. How about yourself?
Great, thank you. Well, we've got a good show here for our listeners. What we're going to do is talk about planning for retirement at all ages. We're going to talk about how it differs planning for retirement in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and ultimately when you hit your 60s, you finally have that reward, everything that you worked for all these years, the money you put away. But some of your investments, your retirement plans, and the tactics you use to save for retirement throughout the ages between your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s will be significantly different. So, Tyler, to get started, why don't you take us through planning for retirement, savings, and what to look for if you're in your 20s?
Yeah, Dean, and I'm going to jump right in here. But we're going to, like you mentioned, touch on the different strategies over each decade of your lifespan. We'll also touch on some common concerns and or frequently asked questions from each age group. So I'm going to jump right in, starting with the 20s. So first off, Fidelity, they published a retirement savings study that I like to call the factor of income study. And basically, the factor of income is how many times your salary you should have saved for retirement. So in our example, we're going to start with someone in their 20s who start saving for retirement. You know, at this point, they're in their 20s, they're fresh out of college, they're in the workforce, and they're contributing to their 401k. So we assume they have a hypothetical salary of about $40,000, let's say, in their 20s. So Fidelity then would recommend someone in their 20s save 1 times their income by the time they reach 30 years old. So in this example, if you average about $40,000 a year in salary in your 20s, then by 30 years old, you should have saved about $40,000, which is 1 times your salary. And this may seem like a lofty goal. Obviously, not everyone is able to do this, but if you are able to save about 10 to 15% of your gross income and average about a 7% annual growth rate, it can be done in your 20s. And some financial strategies to utilize in your 20s to help you along with your retirement saving, I want to go over a couple of those now. And the number one financial strategy that we have to utilize in your 20s, the first thing is going to be set up an emergency fund. So we want to start with at least $1,000 and work our way up to 3 to 6 months of living expenses in your savings, in your emergency fund. So before we even start paying down debt or even really saving, we want to have that emergency fund there and ready to go. The other thing, pay off high interest debt. So with a lot of people in their 20s, you know, they may have graduated from college and they're going to have school loans, credit card loans, maybe auto loans. You want to try and pay off a lot of that higher interest debt in your 20s. And then the other thing is to simply start saving. You know, you're going to have your 401k at work. You want to contribute to that up to the match. You may be able to contribute to a Roth IRA or even a non-qualified brokerage account. So really start saving in your 20s if you can. Not everyone can, but if you can, never too early to start. And also with that, you want to put your savings on autopilot, as we like to call it, which is where you have your 401k or Roth IRA contributions go directly into those accounts, so you don't even think about spending the money. Out of sight, out of mind. We don't want it to hit savings at all where you have to manually put it there. Let's have it automatically go there for someone in their 20s. And another thing too, at this point in time, you want to invest primarily in equities. So equities are stocks, stock mutual funds, stock exchange traded funds. Those are going to be used primarily for growth potential. So again, in your 20s, you have decades of saving ahead of you. Hopefully you'll be able to take a little bit more risk now and in turn for more growth potential and more reward. The last thing here to consider in your 20s is insurance. You should have basic health insurance, auto, maybe renter's insurance if you rent. But those are some points and financial strategies to utilize in your 20s. And a common question I just want to go over too. We have a common question from someone in their 20s, and that is, should I pay off my school loans first, or should I start saving for retirement? Now, Dean, this can be answered a number of different ways. People have their opinions, but what approach do you tell people when they ask that question?
Well, when we hear that question in the office, first of all, should I pay off my school loans first or start saving for retirement? The answer is, with us, pretty cut and dried, and that is both. What we need to do is look at both of them, because it's significant in your 20s to pay off or pay down school loans. It's also significant to get your retirement plan started, because you have all of those years of compounding interest and time on your side. So it's very, very important. So what we recommend is, let's say you have a chunk of money that can be utilized to aggressively pay off loans or to start an account. What we would like to do is have about 75 to 80% of that money go towards the loans. We need to reduce debt as quickly as possible so you can start saving more money as you get older and start putting more money to retirement accounts. So we want about 20 or 25% then to go into retirement accounts. We want them to get started. And the reason we want to get started is you create a habit. Just get started. Don't get so caught up with what the potential investment would be. Just get started. Once you get started, you can amend the investments, the retirement plan to put in there things that you want. As Tyler said, get started with that 401k as quickly as possible. The other thing here, too, Tyler brought up insurance. In your 20s, another form of insurance you should really look at, too, is life insurance, especially if you do carry a lot of debt, because unfortunately, if that day comes where you were to pass away in your 20s, who's going to be stuck with the school loans? So what you need to do is also look at a very basic term policy, which at this stage of your life, provided you're healthy, is going to be extremely cheap, but it's going to help you at that point.
Exactly. Good points there, Dean. So again, in their 20s, you want to set up your emergency fund. You just want to start. You want to pay off some of that high interest debt. And you also want to aim to have about 1 times your salary saved by the time you reach age 30. Now, that brings us then to the 30s. So in the 30s, going back to the previous study by Fidelity where we referenced the factor of income, it's recommended someone in their 30s aim to save 3 times their annual salary by the time they hit 40 years old. So if someone in their 30s averages, let's say, $70,000 in salary, then by the time they reach 40 years old, they should aim to have saved about $210,000, which is 70,000 times 3. And again, that's about 10 to 15% of your gross household income, along with an average return of about 7%. Again, not everyone is going to be able to do this, but if you can, that's a goal to aim for. So in your 30s, you want to aim to save 3 times your salary by the time you hit 40 years old.
Good point.
And with that, to go along with that, some financial strategies that you can utilize to help you get there is, first off, an emergency fund. But this one, we want our full 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved up in savings. I know in the 20s, you want to just start with, say, $1,000 and work your way up. And then by the time you hit 30s, you want that full emergency fund. At this point, you may have kids, you may have a mortgage. Life happens here. You want to have that full emergency fund ready to go. The other thing, save for a down payment on a home. So a lot of people in their 30s, they may think of purchasing a home at this time. And we want to aim for at least 20% down payment on the home. And there's down payments out there. You can get a home or a mortgage with a 5% down payment or even no down payment based on your credit. But at the same time, you got to be careful if you do decide to go that route, because then your monthly mortgage, that might strap you. That's going to be a bit higher. So we want to aim for at least a 20% down payment on the home. The other financial strategy to utilize in your 30s might be starting up 529 college savings plans. And 529 plans, those are simply college savings plans for your children. Because at this point, people in their 30s, you may be married, having children, and you want to start saving for them because, Dean, as we know, college, it isn't going to get any cheaper.
Not at all. Not at all.
Other thing, like you had touched on in your 20s, which can also be utilized in 30s, is insurance. At this point, like I said earlier, you're going to possibly have a spouse and children. You want life insurance to protect them should something happen to you, maybe even disability insurance to replace lost income due to a disability in the family. And then lastly, in terms of financial strategies to utilize in your 30s, You might even want to consider setting up a will and powers of attorney to make sure that your family's taken care of should something happen to you. So again, in your 30s, you want to aim to save 3 times your annual salary by the time you hit 40 years old. That may seem pretty lofty. Not everyone is going to be able to do it, but it's a general goal and guideline if you're able to. Now, that brings me to a common question that we get. So, Dean, a common question that we get from someone in their 30s is, can I use some of the money from my Roth IRA to buy a new house without paying penalties or fees? And a lot of people, they may have a Roth IRA at this point, but in their 30s, you want to buy a new house, you want to purchase different things, you're moving to that next phase of your life. What would you say to people who ask you this question?
Okay, well, first of all, a Roth account, for those of you who might not know, a Roth account is really a tax-free investment that you're setting up, or a retirement income plan. The money that goes in has already been taxed at one point or another, and all of the accumulation is tax-free. So when people come to us, whether it's their 30s, 40s, 50s, doesn't matter, they ask us, can I pull money from my Roth account because I'd like to use it to spend on something else, maybe for a down payment on a house. First of all, we'd like you to keep money in a retirement plan because that's what you created it for. However, life happens. And if that does happen, understand here's what you can do with a Roth account. Yes, you can pull the money out that you put into a Roth account without any penalty, without any taxes. However, if you take all of the money, including the gains that have been added to the original amount you put in there, you will pay a penalty and there will be taxes on the gains. So we'd like to save it for retirement, but if you do have to pull it out, you can pull out the money that you put in there, your cost basis. And for those of you who are just tuning in, I'm Dean Listle. I'm here with Tyler Listle. We are with Secure Retirement Solutions, located in Green Bay on Allied Street. We're financial advisors. If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can call us at 920-347-9888, or you can go to our website at srsplans.com.
Perfect. And Dean, before we move on to the 40s, I just want to briefly touch on the common question there about a Roth IRA. Now, obviously, as you just implied, that Roth IRAs, they are quite flexible. However, we look at Roth IRAs as such valuable money because that money you already paid taxes on, you invested it, what you put in there as well as the earnings can possibly all grow and be withdrawn tax-free, provided it's in place for at least 5 years and you're age 59 and a half or older. So that money, that's sacred money in there because of the different types of limitations. There's income limitations on it. The IRS has contribution limits. So if you do have Roth IRA money in there, you can touch it before retiring. However, if it's in there, we want to try to leave it there for retirement.
That's right.
And so with that said, that brings us on then to the 40s. So in your 40s, it is recommended that someone aim to have saved about 6 times their salary by the time they reach 50 years old. So going along with our examples here, if someone in their 40s averages $100,000 in salary, then by the time they reach 50, they should aim for about $600,000 in retirement funds. So again, that's $100,000 times 6. And it may seem pretty lofty. Not everyone is going to be able to, but it's a general guideline. So that way you know. And again, these are just the numbers that we're throwing out. They're just examples. So it's a guideline where when you're in your 40s, you should calculate whatever your salary is and aim to save about 6 times that by the time you hit 50. It's a general goal. And with that, some financial strategies that we can utilize in our 40s to help us do that is to attempt to pay off your home early. So again, not everyone is going to be able to, but if you do have that cash flow that's freed up, you might want to consider making larger mortgage payments when possible. Really, obviously, paying off your home, paying off that mortgage is going to free up a lot of income as you get older into your 50s and 60s.
Also, one other item there too, Tyler, when it comes to attempting to pay off your home, if you do pay it off early, as an example, if you're paying $900 a month in mortgage and you pay it off, what do you do with the $900? What you do is invest it. Yep. So basically, you've created the habit of paying off that mortgage. You're very happy that you were to aggressively pay off the mortgage. So then take those proceeds that you've created a habit, paid for a number of years, and reinvest it. You've already been doing that to pay towards the house, use it to pay towards an investment.
Exactly. Very good point, Dean. Like you mentioned, that money can go into an investment for your own retirement, maybe even for your children for their 529 college saving plans. You can free up a lot of money that way. And then obviously you want to make sure, before you even attempt to pay off the home early, you want to make sure all other debt is paid off. Your credit card loans, auto loans, school loans, you want to get all those knocked out as well. The other financial strategy to consider in your 40s would possibly be a Roth IRA conversion. And in your early 40s, say you may have old IRAs from previous employers that you had rolled over, and this could be a good time to convert to a Roth IRA by paying the taxes now and letting the funds grow tax-free thereafter. That would turn it into a Roth IRA at that point. But keep in mind, folks, for a Roth IRA conversion and specific tax or legal advice, we want to get an accountant or an attorney involved in the holistic picture here. So that brings us then to the question. Well, a common question that we get from someone in their 40s is, I'm in my 40s now and I barely have anything saved for retirement, and there are plenty of people that, they had life struggles, things happened, they weren't able to. It's quite common, actually, but they want to know, is it too late to create a savings plan and a retirement plan? Dean, what would you tell people who ask a question like this?
Again, our response is pretty cut and dried. Absolutely not. It is not too late at all. As we tell people, it's not too early to start. We'd love to have you start early. However, if you don't, it's never too late. The only thing that really changes is the type of investments or retirement plans that you would look at. As people start to get older and they find out that they didn't save enough money, they do one of two things. They try to catch lightning in a bottle by getting as aggressive as they possibly can to try to make up for lost time. Unfortunately, that can be the wrong move if the market doesn't cooperate with you. You're taking risk that's probably beyond your risk tolerance. The other side is people will say, well, I've accumulated this much, I can't afford to lose it while I'm trying to get more, so they get too conservative. And what happens in that situation, it makes you feel good, you sleep well at night for a couple of years only to find out that, unfortunately, you're not keeping up with maybe inflation or cost of living. So there's always a happy medium. It's never too late to get started. It's never too early to get started.
Exactly. And you brought up a good point there. You don't want to throw up just a bunch of money in stocks and take on that unnecessary risk, and you don't want to just throw everything in CDs and not even keep pace with inflation. So find yourself a good financial advisor that you can sit down with and look at your holistic picture and help get you started that way. Okay, now we're heading into the 50s. Here's really the meat and potatoes as retirement is going to start creeping up on us here. So let's jump right in. In the 50s, it's recommended that someone in their 50s target about 8 times their salary by the time they reach 60 years of age. So in our example here, if someone is in their 50s and they average about $100,000 in salary, then by the time they reach 60 years old, they should shoot for about $800,000 in retirement funds, which is $100,000 in salary times 8. And again, folks, these are pretty lofty numbers, and not everyone is going to make $100,000 in salary or can save $800,000 by the time they're 60 years old. But it does just help give us general guidelines for how many times your salary you should aim to save at each age group. So it's a general goal that you can look forward to. And really here is where we want to focus on progression. You want to save a little bit more each decade. So as you go through your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, into your 50s and 60s, you want to try and save more, but also keep in mind that life happens, where people aren't always able to, and it's all about formulating a plan because as we said earlier, you're going to have kids. You probably can't save as much initially when you have your children. At the same time, you're going to have a mortgage, and you might even go through a job loss or a job change too. And it might put you behind a little bit, where you may, instead of increasing your contribution each year, you may actually have to stop or decrease, but you want to look at the whole entire plan.
Right. And a couple things with the 50s here, Tyler, too, is, that's the tipping point. That's the decade when you finally wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm getting pretty close to retirement. I need to get serious. So what happens here with some of the investments is when you're in your 20s, you never even had a conversation that bond was in there. Mm-hmm. Now you're having having conversations that you need to start putting some bond positions in your portfolios to get a little bit more conservative. So you wake up, you decide that, you know what, I'm getting closer to retirement, I need to get serious. The IRS also tends to think you're starting to get close to retirement because that's when they allow you those catch-up provisions, which, you know, Tyler can discuss.
Yeah, good points there, Dean. And that leads us right into the strategies to utilize in your 50s when it comes to saving for retirement. And we just have one main one here, and that is to attempt to max out your retirement accounts. And like you mentioned, Dean, when people reach age 50, the IRS allows some pretty generous, they're called catch-up contributions, where you can do just that. You can catch up in your retirement savings. So, for example, let's say you're working at a for-profit company, you've got a 401k plan there. When you're over 50, you can contribute $24,000 a year. And if you have a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA over 50 years old, you can contribute $6,500 a year to that. You may work at a hospital or a school. You have a 403B. Same thing there. You can contribute $24,000 a year when you're over 50 years old there. Simple IRA is another one. You might work for a smaller employer. You can contribute $15,500 a year there. And lastly, you may be self-employed and have a couple employees below you. You may have what's called a SEP IRA, and you can contribute either the lesser of 25% of your compensation or up to $54,000 per year there. So as we can see, the IRS, they do allow some generous limits here where you can really push that money, plug that money away. Not everyone is going to have to save all that in their 50s, and quite frankly, a lot of people aren't able to. But if you are, the IRS allows a great opportunity to really plug away at your retirement accounts and catch up, so to speak. Now that leads us into our common question that we get from someone in their 50s, and that is, retirement is creeping up on me. What are some of the biggest expenses in retirement that I'm unaware of now? So during this point, you know, people in their 50s, they know retirement is on the horizon, but they're curious here. They don't know exactly which expenses to prepare for when they don't have the payroll coming in anymore. So, Dean, what do you say there?
Okay, maybe 15 years ago, it used to be a mortgage, property taxes, and health care. That was about 15 years ago. Now, it's pretty consistent. Health care, long-term care, and taxes tend to be the big ones. And you know what we're going through with our health care right now. There's a lot of changes being made, or at least proposed. Before going into retirement, make sure you sit down with a health insurance agent who can explain how it works with health care right now. Health insurance premiums are based on income, not on pre-existing conditions anymore. So if you retire and you need health insurance, sit down with an agent, let them take you through that. In our office, we have people before they actually retire sit down with our tax consultant. We have them sit down with the attorney to talk about wills and trusts and probate. And then we also have them sit down and talk to our health insurance or Medicare agent, so we could talk about those things. That all fits into a complete retirement plan. But some of the expenses you need to be aware of going into your 50s and planning for retirement: health care, long-term care costs, and taxes.
Perfect. Now, Dean, as we roll into the last 5 minutes here, that leads us right into the 60s and 70s here. So this is really where people are really planning for retirement, and some are even starting to retire, or they have retired, typically at this age group here. So going back to Fidelity study, it's recommended that someone in their 60s target anywhere from 8 to 12 times their salary, depending on their lifestyle and if they plan to retire sometime in their 60s or 70s. So, for example, what I mean by that is maybe someone who is 62 might need to target 12 times their salary by the time they hit 62 if they plan to vacation a lot and do a lot of travel, live a higher standard of living. They're going to want to save a little bit more. Whereas, let's say someone works part-time until they're 70, they may need closer to 8 times their salary because they're retiring later on at life. They're not going to need as much. So this is a bit flexible, but really here, the 60s and 70s, it isn't as much about saving as it is about retiring and enjoying life with the funds that you've worked so hard to save up over all those years. So some strategies to utilize in your 60s and 70s for retirement planning. Number one is developing a strategy to withdraw the money. So instead of saving here, we want to now look at, okay, how do we withdraw the money here? We have a bunch of different investments. We have a ton of different retirement accounts. Which ones do we withdraw from first? How do we stage our withdrawals? How do we go about doing that? So really at that point, it's time to find a qualified advisor to help you structure your withdrawals and how you take the money out. Second strategy here is Social Security. You're going to want to file for Social Security anywhere between age 62 and 70. You want to be sure to look at all your options, find an advisor that can sit down and model everything out for you, and even go down to the Social Security Administration and make sure that you have everything in line there. The other thing that's going to happen in your 60s is Medicare. At age 65, you've got to sign up for Medicare Part A and then Part B, either at 65 or by the time that you retire. And this is where you want to talk to a Medicare agent and work with a financial planning firm that takes a holistic approach and could help answer any of these questions here.
Right. And Tyler, you bring up a good point with financial planning firm. We are that. When people come through our door, we give them a complimentary financial plan. Part of the reason is we need to know your whole story and situation before we can make recommendations, whether it be on Social Security filing, how to withdraw from certain accounts, or estate planning. So, and when you talk about Social Security, that comes into your complete retirement plan, but understand we're not associated or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other governmental agency, but you need to know how Social Security works. People are very surprised at how many times we model out Social Security over the top of your expenses, debt, and also over the top of your retirement plans, and it might be recommended you take it in a different fashion than what you thought prior to coming into the office. So if there's anything here you heard today that you'd like information about, you can contact us. My name is Dean Listle. I'm here with Tyler Listle. We're with Secure Retirement Solutions. We're financial advisors. Our office is located on Allied Street in Green Bay. You can reach us at 920-347-9888. And one of the questions that comes up here when people are in their 60s and 70s, it's about a required minimum distribution. People refer to it as an RMD. An RMD has to come out of your qualified accounts. A qualified account would be, as an example, a traditional IRA or 401k at 70 and a half years old. So people have to start taking this money whether they want to or not. And they want to know what to do with the money if they're not prepared to use it. It might be more than they are accustomed to taking. Well, first of all, you did work your whole life to get to this point. So I do hope you spend it. Okay, I'd love to see you spend the money. If you don't spend it, I'd love to see you gift it, whether it be to your church, a charity, children, grandchildren, or any other loved one. I mean, you can gift it. And the last thing really is to reinvest it. The couple things you don't really have going for you when it comes to reinvesting at this stage of your life is time. And so you're not going to get a substantial compounding interest here unless you take risk that is pretty aggressive. So really, learn to spend it, learn to gift it, and then lastly, look at possibly reinvesting it. So, Tyler, as we come to a close today, I think we had a good show here. People understand how to put aside money and what to look for as far as goals and guidelines when they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So that's all the time we have this week. Hope you enjoyed the show. See you later, and hope you'll join again next week.
Thank you. See you next week.
You've been listening to Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. To get more information from Dean and Tyler, contact them at Secure Retirement Solutions on Allied Street in Green Bay. Call 920-347-9888 or visit them at srsplans.com. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC. Member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services is not an affiliated company.